Okay, I guess we can begin. We're still holding Siman Tzadik Ches, Sif Bet, towards the end, where the Mechaber gave us an example of Im Nisarev B'minoi u'b'she'eino mino V'nishpach be'inyan she'en yecholin la'amod alav l'sha'aroi V'noida sha'yo rubo heter miminoi roim she'eino mino ki'ilu eino V'ashar mino raba alav mevato. So you have minoi mixing in with minoi and she'eino minoi. The regular, standard, typical, classical example of min b'minoi is easy to figure out. Either it's going to be a bitul berov, going to be a bitul b'shishim, depending on if it's dry, if there's liquid. We already know by now what tam ki ikar is and how that affects. Min b'she'eino minoi is also easy to figure out, more or less. The problem is, however, in the event there was nishbach. Nishbach, we don't know if we have the required amount, so it will all depend on if it's a derabana or doraita, safek derabana lekula. Therefore, as long as you had the rov in the min b'mino situation, it's okay. Safek doraita lechumra, in the min b'she'eino mino situation, you would require at least 6. So nishbach, but you need the bare minimum. Cancel out the tam. However, the unique situation of min b'mino and she'eino mino has a different kind of a solution, very not typical. The Chaber says the solution is, if you can't figure out how much there was, we're talking about nishbach, but you know that the majority of heter mimino was there, you make believe, you make believe as though the eino mino does not exist. Wow. We spoke about this last week already, that this is very, very different, but it's obviously taken from some source, and the source is a Gemara. The problem with that Gemara is, as it is pointed out by the poskim, it has nothing to do with our case. We are concerned with tam ki ikar, and we hold that min b'mino is batal, berov. Not like the case of the Gemara, where the discussion is that there's no bittul in the min b'mino. In other words, the Gemara's example is the exact opposite of the example of the Mechaber. Over there, the Gemara is suggesting, assume, make believe the minoi, which is the problem, does not exist, is not around, because that's the minoi is causing the problem. Min b'mito lo batal, according to the Gemara. And then all you have is min b'she'eino minoi. Great. If you have min b'she'eino minoi, all you need is a certain amount, and you can be mevatel the taste. That has nothing to do with this. Over there we're concerned with the min b'mino. Here we're concerned with the min b'she'eino mino. How could you say you just put away, you ignore the she'eino mino, when that is the problem here, the flavor? Right? Everybody follows? Yeah? This is where we left off. I mean, pretty much we covered this, just reviewing, refreshing ourselves with the questions, with the issues here. And therefore, even though the Rashba is the one that learns this halacha, and it's very clear that he takes this halacha from that Gemara, that's the source, they're very, very different. And that's why the Marshal and everybody else, quite a few Rishonim even, basically have a problem with this, with the Rashba. How could you say, just salek et she'eino mino, when that is the ikar habaya, the ikar problem over here of the tam that we're trying to get rid of. So the Rashal basically disagrees. Right? It's not shayach over here. This does not apply over here because here we're dealing with bitul tam. Over there it's not an issue of bitul tam. The two are not related. And you cannot resolve this problem by just making an assumption it does not exist. It's there, it absorbs flavor, and that's it. And Prach, the Pri Chodesh, says basically the same thing. He also argues with the Rashba, and he says, what kind of a solution is that? As long as there is tam in this pot, there was flavor here, mixed with the heter, it doesn't make a difference whether there was min and minoi. There's min b'she'eino minoi. There's a problem with the tam. At some point, you have to reckon with this tam here. So it doesn't help me, the suggestion that you're saying, make believe it's not there. Well, how could I make believe? The facts will remain the same, that the tam is there. So the Pri Chodesh also argues on the Rashba. Then I saw what he brings down the siftei dat. Sometimes you really have to limit yourself. And as we say in Hebrew, en davar sof. Do you want to see what everybody has to say about this? I on my own would not go onto every single one every Rishon and every Achron, unless it's a major sugya. But because it is mentioned in the notes, I will also quote it, the Siftei Dat, that he adds an additional idea that perhaps the heter that was there only scattered up until a certain amount, 20 versus 60. We know this from kafela. Sometimes if a kafela, a cook, a chef, can determine that a combination, a taaruvos, doesn't have a flavor within, let's say, 30 or 40, there's no 60, it would be permissible according to some opinions, right? Even though there's no 60, he tastes it and says there's no taste. It's possible that it's so diluted that it just did not, the flavor did not go anywhere, did not go too far. So here the Siftei Dat also wants to say that perhaps that is the reason why this would be a problem, because you want to say that it's no longer there, that the heter took over, the heter took care of it, that means the mino is bottled berov. It could be that there's not enough. It just could be, it just went so far, there's still some flavor left. You know, the Chazon Ish has a whole piece on this. It's a slightly different case where one can see from his words that I don't think he would agree with the Siftei Dat. He says pieces usually get cooked at the same time. The same amount of flavor comes out in equal amounts. In other words, I don't think he would agree with this idea that we have to, the doubt that perhaps it did not go out enough, and therefore it would still pose a problem.
Question.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you're done with
Go.
the Basar,
Go ahead. Yeah.
quickly, when we're saying that domino simultaneously in one pot,
Right.
according to the Mechaber and the Ramah doesn't argue. He's not saying that because we have Rov, it was misbap. With respect to the, if I understand him correctly, he's saying with respect to the min, I'm allowed the assumption, lemaisa, in other words, and hold it effective, that I had 60. Although I don't know if I had 60. But because Safik the Rabbanan Lekula,
Right.
so I'm allowed to act as though I had 60 in the Roiv.
Right.
Now, if I indeed had 6 in the Roiv, I don't need a 6-second 6 in the min b'she'enomi. 1 times 6 in this pot is enough.
Well, obviously, one time is enough.
So,
Right.
since I'm allowed to make the assumption with respect to the min b'mino aspect that I had 60, I mean that's why
But
I
I
can
had
eat.
rov, you mean, the minvamino.
No, that I know for certain I had Roiv.
Right.
If I don't know for certain I had Roiv,
Right. Okay,
there's
yeah.
nothing.
Right.
But rather, since it's min b'minoi, Safek the Rabbanan Lekula,
Right.
meaning to say that I'm about to act with respect to the min b'mino as though I actually had 60. That's what it means, Lekula. I'm allowed
In
to
the whole
consume
mixture.
it. I need 60.
Right.
Min b'mino, I need 60.
Right.
But I'm allowed to
At the very
interpret
least.
my ignorance with respect to whether there was 60. I'm allowed to interpret the kula as though there had been 60.
Yes, that's
Now,
correct.
if there were 60, and I'm allowed to interpret my ignorance as though there had been, if there were indeed 60, then the 60 of the min b'mino would be mevatel the isser. I don't need an additional 60 in the min b'she'eno mino.
No, you don't need an additional 6.
Right. So since I can only consume the min b'mino because I'm making the halachic presumption it was 60, I'm allowed to do that. So with respect to the min b'she'eno mino, I already know it in 60.
Yeah, but the 60 you're assuming between everything.
No,
Yes.
by the min b'mino.
No, you're assuming between everything.
Why between everything?
Between everything, there was 60.
No.
To cancel everything in the pot.
No.
Everything in the
If
pot.
I had no
Right.
min b'she'eno mino, let's
Right.
say I had in the pot only
Yeah.
min b'mino.
You mean the heter. Just say heter.
And
You mean heter.
but I only
Right.
had heter in its own min. I wouldn't have any she'eno mino in this pot.
Okay, yeah.
Now, if I have the heter of the same min as the isser,
Okay.
and I know for sure I had a majority in the heter, but I'm not sure whether I had 60 in the heter and it got spilled out.
Right.
Talking about the spilled situation.
Okay, yeah.
Why am I allowed to consider? I need 60 derabanan here. I'm not allowed to eat it if I know for sure there was no 60.
Right.
I need 60 derabanan.
Because you
I'm
may
just
have
allowed
some,
to
you may have
conduct-
right. You're
because
assuming
it's a safek derabanan. I'm allowed to conduct myself
as though
as though I had the 60.
that's correct.
Now that I'm allowed to conduct myself as though I had the
Right.
60, it means that the Isser was misbattled in 60, as far as I'm concerned, because I'm allowed to make that presumption halachically. Now that it was misbattled in 60, just by the min b'mino, add the she'eno mino in
Yeah,
there.
but how does that come about? I understand what you
Halachically, since I was allowed to make the presumption with respect to the one.
But when am I allowed to make that presumption? After I've eliminated the she'eno mino. In other words, I'm making that presumption after the
I'm
fact.
saying this is what allows me to eliminate the she'eno mino.
No, it's the other way around. Yeah.
It creates a whole new situation.
Why does it create a new situation? If I didn't have the she'eno mino can only add to what's already there.
Yeah, but I have here the kula. What's the kula over here? The kula is that I can always rely, if I need to, on the rov.
No, I'm misunderstanding.
Okay.
Yeah,
go ahead. Yeah.
We're not talking about the Rashba's
No,
case.
the Rashba's case, the Bachama's case, right. Right. Right.
All
Yeah.
I'm saying is, if
Yeah.
I had the means the mino alone without any she'eno mino,
Yes.
then I would be allowed to eat it not because of roy, but because I'm allowed to treat the situation as though I had a vadai 60.
But even if you did not have a vadai stick, it would be safe.
Why would I need a rabbinic? I need 60. I can't eat it without 60.
By rabbinic decree only.
Yeah, but
not Midoraita.
No, but rabbinic,
Right.
I need it.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm not allowed to eat it unless I have the 60. I'm
Yeah.
only allowed to act
To-
as though
to-
I had
to
the
act
60.
as though you have it. Right, because,
once
sure.
I'm allowed to act as though I had the 60, what do I care
Yeah.
if there's an she'eno mino in that part as well?
As
If I actually had the 60 in the roif, it would
Right.
be sufficient.
Right.
I don't need 60 in here and in there. And with respect to the roif, I'm allowed to act as though I had the 60.
Right.
So what do I care if I have another 60 in the she'eno mino if I'm already allowed to act as though I had the 60?
Yeah, but it's the same 60. It's
That would
all.
always be the
It's always going to be the same 60.
And if I actually had 60 in the
Yeah,
roif,
that's what I'm
that would,
assuming.
that would be sufficient.
Yeah.
I wouldn't need to have an extra 60.
No, it's not.
So I only need 60 in the roif. That would be sufficient.
60 in the roiv or and the roiv.
I'm sorry, I only
Yeah.
need the 60 in the minor. If I actually lemais it, really, mitzias, I had 60 in the roif.
Right.
Do I need an extra 60 in the she'eno mino? An additional?
It's the same 60.
No, there's a mino and there's a she'eno mino.
Yeah.
Same 60. You mean, are you saying you need 60 enomino? Is that what you're saying? That's where the 60 is?
You have to have somewhere
60.
60.
If I had 60 in the
Yeah.
mino,
Yeah, you have 60.
I don't know where the 60 is.
I count how much pelting,
Yeah.
I count how much I have in the mino,
Right.
and I have 60 against it, and I have she'eno mino in the same part as well.
Yeah, but
if
it's
I
a
have 60
combination. It's like I said earlier, it's a combination of everything that is producing 60. You don't
No,
just
I'm
add.
saying if I had only in the mino alone,
Yeah,
60,
obviously, only.
Yeah,
You're right.
the mino alone
You're right.
60 could
Yes,
happen.
yes, that's true.
then I would be able to eat it.
Yeah, but
without
I'm not
having-
making that assumption.
But when I'm saying that the Rabbanan, I'm allowed to treat the mino as though it had 60,
Yeah, I'm treating
So
the
now-
mino as rov, and as the whole combination as 60.
why not?
That's what we're saying here.
No.
I'm treating the fact,
I'm being
Yeah.
mitzalek v'she'eno mino.
Right.
So I'm not being mitzaref it to 60,
and I know for a fact there was at least rov in the minoi.
and I'm allowed.
I know that.
And
I know that.
You know that-
I don't even make an
But
assumption.
there's more than that. I'm also allowed to treat the mino as though it had 60, because of Suffolk, the Rabbanan.
Yeah, but remember the formula of 60 here, that is necessary in a sense. Lemaise is not being used even. I'm not even using
So
this
I'm
formula.
proposing that it is being used.
And that's what I'm saying. I'm saying it's not even being used because that's the whole idea of Salek. We're not even using it.
No.
What permission do I have not to use it? That's the question. What permission do I have not to use it? What permission do I have not to use it?
The difference. No, wait a second. The Masalik doesn't.
Well,
The Masalik
yeah.
doesn't. The Masalik doesn't take care of needing 60. The Masalik takes care of needing to say Safek deraisa lechumra. Masalik doesn't remove the requirement of 60.
Yeah.
Masalik removes the Safek deraisa lechumra of the
Yeah.
she'eno mino.
Yeah. No.
So now I'm left with Safek.
As
deraisa
I will
lechumra.
explain soon, there's two explanations as to what happens to the tam, and I'll get to that in a moment before we go to the other shita. Ultimately, I'm concerned with what happens to the tam over here. It is possible that even with less than shishim, okay, I will have managed to take care of the tam. Okay, even less than shishim, I would have managed to take care of this problem tam. Okay, and we'll see two ways to do it. Two ways we explained it last week. One of them is the taz, and the other one is offered by other poskim as to how it actually technically happens. When the fact is you have this technically, because if we follow the mechaber's lashon, this is not technical. Technical, the tam is there. It's a fact. The metzias, it's there. But it's a special chidush that the Rashba is basically telling us of salek. It sounds like you assume that it's not there, and which will lead to another interesting scenario that I have here from the Taz. So if we apply this chidush, we still have to figure out how is it happening in Lemaisa, the Metzius, that the flavor here is being cancelled out.
I'm tasting the flavor.
Right.
But the flavor...
Exactly. You still
but the flavor that I'm tasting is halachically not an isser.
Exactly. So that we began, and you began to explain it last week as well. So I'm going to get to that. So there's two separate things here. That's why I'm saying here, the chidush here is how can I excuse myself? How can I not allow the formula of shishim to be used? Only because I have a suffix here in a derabanan. And in a suffix derabanan, I can be mekel. And what's the kula? The kula will tell me I can assume there were 60. But, you know what? I don't really need it.
You don't need it?
I don't even need it. I only need it in derabanan.
So you do need it.
But I'm safe. Why am I safe? Because if there was a rav, at least it's okay midoraita. And in this situation, the Rashba says the Chachamim would allow it to be soymech on a shir of rav and not shishim. That's the whole chiddush of this halacha here.
Why is there a rav and not shir?
We don't need shishim here. We do, midrabanan.
Why don't we do?
Okay, we do.
So,
okay,
yeah,
we do midrabanan. We do. We would need to have a shishim shir.
So, because what I wanted to get to is, so the real problem that I have with this, how can suffix derabanan lekul cancel out a suffix de oraisa lechumra?
How does it cancel out?
Because what gives me permission to eat the mixture, forget for a second the she'enu mino.
Go ahead.
Is not that I have roiv, that's a condition.
Right.
What gives me permission the mixture is that suffix derabanan kula allows me to look at them as though I had six.
That's correct.
In the min b'min. But
in the whole combination.
In the min but in the min b'min. But in the min b'she'enu mino, I have to say suffix d'oraisa l'chumra.
That's true.
So how does a suffix d'Rabbanan l'kula override a suffix d'oraisa l'chumra?
Now that's what's bothering. That's what's bothering the Marshal, and that's the Rashal, and that's everybody else. Pretty much, you said it in different words. Exactly. Yes. Exactly. That's the Rashal, and that's the Pri Chodesh. And you know what they suggest? They suggest, you know what? Okay. I understand that this is a chidush that allows you to use roiv because you have min and minoi, but wait a minute, you can't separate the two. You still need shishim. Somehow you still need that. How could you just separate between the two? So you know what the Marshal will say, and what everybody else will say? Okay, everything else is mutter, the min minor, but the she'ena minu will remain asor. Remember that? Did you see that?
Yeah, of course.
That's what they will say. They will make a compromise here. They will make a compromise.
Yeah, my whole
it's a compromise.
My whole point is that that's a different argument. Because my argument is when I'm eating the min b'she'enu mino, and I'm tasting the chicken was the trick one,
right?
And I'm tasting a chicken.
Okay.
Then this taste of chicken that I'm tasting, the Rabbanan, the taste that was misbabel in 60.
Okay, so that I'm going to get to that soon.
But the oraisa, it's not a taste that was misbabel in 60.
As far as the taste, I'll get to that in a moment. What's the mechanics, the dynamics of the taste? What happens to the taste according to Mechaber and according to the Rashba? Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you to go over last time, but for the Rishon, the gravy, he says it's asr based.
Right.
But he says
many Rishonim say it's asr, yeah.
But he says the heter mean all that, even though he had a question on the gravy.
Yes.
The
he would allow for it. He says, okay, I'll go along with that.
My question was the gravy, if there's a question of itself, this is just my own thing.
Yeah.
All the time, as far as I could see, we're dealing a lot.
Right.
So there has to be a way to get for taste. So I figured the way that's going is through the gravy.
Okay.
So the gravy has a question and it's Isser itself because the gravy's Isser.
Exactly. That's the question of the Gilyon Marsha and the Pri Megadim. If you had a chance to see that in your notes, why don't we just say once you say the gravy is Asr, you say Hanan on the gravy. Hanan, however, in other Isurim other than Basar v'chalav, is only Midrabanan. According to those who say Hanan Shar Isurim, Chatichat Naaset Nevela Hanan, right? If once you say the gravy is also if it's also, then everything should be also. Well, how can we make such a compromise of saying this is mutter and this is asur, right? So what's the answer? The answer is since Hanan in other isurim other than basar b'chalav is a derabanan, so this is a suffix derabanan to begin with. The whole thing is a suffix derabanan over here. So everything stays a kula. But What's interesting, I signed the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan has a whole write-up about the various shitas on what happens to the Isser when it's batal. Is it really transformed to a heter, as we spoke about many times, or does it still stick around? It's just that you're allowed to eat it, depending on how you view bittul. So he says, according to the shitas, I think which includes the Rambam, where the Isser is never transformed to a heter, bittul means that the Isser is there still, it's present, it's just you're allowed to have it, because of the din of bittul or of rov. He says in this case, it would continue to be asur. He says according to those who hold the isur does not transform to a heter, the Aruch HaShulchan says that this would continue to be asur because the isur is still there. How could you say it didn't disappear?
So you got actually.
You always have to get rid of the real piece if you identify it. The question is.
It's okay with you,
No, but that's according.
You got rid of the pieces.
I don't understand. If it's bottle, what's bottle mean? They can't eat it anyway. It's not bottle.
Right.
If they have to, you said get some.
In our case, whenever we have bittul, a real bittul that everybody's in agreement of bittul, then obviously you can eat it. There's only a question: can you eat it together? Depending on if it's yavish with yavish, or how do you eat the mixture when the isser is there? You're for sure going to be eating an isser. Several hot dogs are kosher, one is treif. Can you eat it all at the same time? Well, it depends. The Rosh says yes. It converts. It's all mutter now. It's mutter. The hot dog is right now mutter to eat. According to the others who hold the whole idea of bittul does not stem from transformation, it stems from rov, called the parish miruba parish. You would have to eat only one at a time, because you would be saying statistically what I'm grabbing right now from this mixture most likely is the kosher one. So it means the isser is there all the time still. It's never disappeared, and therefore I can't have it at the same time.
But if the treif one has a label on it that says treif, then you have to throw it out.
Yeah, obviously.
Right.
Yeah, obviously.
Obey.
Yeah. So anyway, so the Aruch HaShulchan, therefore, just a little point, an additional point, he would say that according to them, this would also be usher. Now, in reality, what is the dynamics of what's really happening over here? It's a chidush. This halacha is an interesting chidush. I mean, we have to admit it. We're concerned all along with this tam. We're wondering whether we can use a kafele or not in Seif Aleph. Tam is a problem. Tam ki ikar, and we said that mechaber even passes tam ki ikar is doraita, right? According to those shitas. So what's going on over here? So as Ilan pointed out, there are various ways of looking at what is happening to the tam. There are some who claim simply that the tam of the Isser is mizbatel min b'minoi. Before it attacks the she'eno minoi, it's already batel berov. In other words, there's two dinim, or there's two events, two things happening in this pot, in this mixture. One is a min b'minoi between each other. They cancel each other out, like in algebra. You have this one cancels this one. They've canceled each other out. So they've already eliminated. The Isser has been eliminated through the min b'minoi in rov. That elimination does not pose a problem to the she'eno mino anymore. Why should it? That's the simple interpretation of the dynamics of what's happening to the flavor. The flavor is there, but it's not an asur flavor. It's not an asur flavor. It's been bottled in rov. Another way of looking at it is that the flavor of the heter and the flavor of the isser are both contributing simultaneously. So the eno mino, as it is absorbing, it has absorbed a beli'ah. That's the Taz, I think, the explanation. It has absorbed a bliya of both. And as it absorbs, those two bliyas are basically neutralized each other. In other words, that kind of a combination of bliyas is not asar. It's batel. It's very similar. Is it batel here, or is it batel as it is being absorbed in the she'eno mino? The she'eno mino is not absorbing only an iser tam. It is also absorbing a partial heter tam.
A combination of
the two. And the combination of the two is not a tam asur min Torah. Not min Torah, that kind of a tam. So either way, that's the dynamics of what is happening to this tam. But it's a chidush either way. And because it's such a big chidush, not everybody's in agreement with this halacha. And a lot of them, the poskim say you should be machmir. I think the Piskei Tshuva even brings down that you should peel off a little bit, a layer of the meat. Rinse it out and klipa and get rid of the rest.
Now, a quick question. According to those that answer it,
right?
At least I would think that when the Isser enters into, it will spread between mino and she'eno mino. So really, the she'eno should only need to have 6 again, proportionally that amount of Isser that the she'elo mino is in proportion to the heter mino.
One more time.
If I have 10 ounces of mino,
Right.
and I have 20 ounces of eno mino in pot.
Okay.
And now an iser of mino that consists of, oh, I said 12 ounces falls into the pot. Then 1/3 will go to the mino,
Right.
and 2/3 will go to the eno mino because the proportions between eno mino and mino heter in the pot is 2.
Right.
So really, the eno mino should only need 60 again, 2/3 of the iser, and not the whole iser.
Right.
Because it spreads evenly between mino and she'eno mino.
Apparently, yes.
I mean, I think,
Yeah,
well,
yes.
so really even the one that usher it should only usher it in the case where the eno mino doesn't have 60 against the iser in proportion to mino and she'eno mino in the pot
Yes.
of heter.
So that's a very good point, that if you can really calculate that to that point,
Okay.
you may be able to consider that. And later on in Hilchos Taaruvot, we will see that there are situations when you use calculations of how much was there, how much is there, and do you know how much there was exactly. These things perhaps can make a difference. Just over here, what has complicated the matters is that it's a bit spilled. That has complicated the matter more. But whenever you really have an idea of proportions, percentages, there's no doubt that at times you can use them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yes. That's a good point. Okay, just a few additional points that are brought down by the poskim. We have here a situation of nishpach. Okay, sometimes it could be a suffix d'oraita, sometimes it could be a suffix d'rabbanan. One is lechumra, one is lekula. What happens if you're cooking chicken and you had some milk spill into the chicken? For those of you who learn Basar b'chalav, you know that that's only midrabbanan. Lo tevashel gedi b'chalev imo, only red meat. Okay, not chicken. Chicken is midrabbanan. I don't know if they used to have a glass of milk with chicken in the old days before this gzera d'rabbanan.
I think the place in area
There was-
used to pickle it.
There was a place, yeah, but I don't know if it was customary for everyone to do so. Nevertheless, the Chachamim say they look too much alike, and therefore chicken is by rabbinic decree also also to have with milk. Not only is it also to have with milk, you cannot have milk after you've had chicken. In the same way, you cannot pizza or have a glass of milk or coffee with milk after you've had dinner, steak dinner, right? Same idea. You have to wait, depending on your custom, several hours before you can have the milk. So the question here is, what happens if you have milk and chicken mixed and nishpach? So nishpach is going to be a suffix. Do I have 60 or not? So this is min b'she'eno mino. But what's the difference between this case of chicken and milk versus our case? Even though it's min b'she'eno mino, perhaps it's a min b'she'eno mino, but it's a derabanan, the whole thing. The whole thing of chicken with milk is a derabanan. So maybe I should just say, oh, as long as I had rov.
Enjoy.
What?
Enjoy.
Right?
Now again, what I say, as long as I had raw, only applies if it's
Yes, only if
If
it's
it didn't
spilled.
spill,
Yes,
you
only
can't
if
say
it's
that.
spilled. Yes. So the Taz, and I think the Torah Chatas also, are machmir in this. Why are they machmir? In the same way that we're machmir on eating cheese after, you cannot have cheese after chicken. Why? Because you may come to eat cheese after meat. It's an additional gzera. It's not eating them, it's not cooking them together. It's an additional idea, an additional prohibition of not eating one after the other. Why can't I do that? Because I may come to also eat, eventually, by mistake, cheese after meat, which is d'oraita. It's the real Isser. So therefore, the Taz says, because of that, here we would also be machmir. In the same way we're machmir there, not to eat one after the other. Here we would want to be machmir for the same reason, not to make the mistake, not to differentiate, because they are very similar.
Taz. One thing that I don't understand.
Yes.
Basar b'chalav,
Yes.
the oraita, proper beef,
Yeah.
is only prohibited if the two are cooked together.
That's correct.
So eating cheese even by beef is a derabbanan.
In a sense.
So if I'm going,
But you're right.
so I'm going to usher cheese after chicken, then it's a derabbanan to avoid violating a derabbanan.
Yeah, but what's the reason over there? Why that gzera is there?
Beef and
Because you may come to do the other one.
The cooking. Because I might come to cook the beef together with the dairy,
Yeah.
so therefore I'm not allowed even to eat these after beef, even though they weren't cooked together.
That's correct. No, but why do we aser there to eat cheese after chicken?
Yeah, so cheese after
Because
chicken,
you may mix it up
and
with
cheese
basar
after beef.
behema.
With cheese after beef would be a rabbanan. So I have a shvus
Yeah,
d'shvus.
yeah, but you're right.
So here I have a shvus d'shvus
But-
that's already a rabbanan.
All right,
Rabbanan.
yeah.
So now I'm adding another rabbanan on the rabbanan.
You're right.
With
That's a
the
good.
60.
That's a good point.
Three rabbanans.
It's a good point. Even though you understand Elan's question, it's a good point, right? It's all midrabanan, nevertheless. But you realize that over there it's a gzera, and here the Taz wants to say that we would be machmir for similar reasons because of a gzera. However, since nevertheless it's all midrabanan, nonetheless, guess what? The shach says go ahead and, like he said, enjoy it. The shach who's machmir many times actually here, he's mekel. He would be mekel. The shach and the pri chodesh are actually mekel. In this case, with the Taz is machmir. Yeah, you're right. Yes, absolutely.
If you could
Yes,
say
if you could, it's right, exactly. Yeah.
That's down to the limit somewhere.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting is there's another situation. What happens if it's nishbach? We're still talking about nishbach. There's a solution. Why don't you give it to a kafela? Just give it to a kafela. You know what? Save yourself all the doubts, the halachas, the machloikas, the shitas. Just give it to a kafela. Kafela is a good way to resolve this matter. And if you're going to tell me, well, we don't rely on kafela.
It does.
1 second. Let's say you're an Ashkenaz, right? You don't rely on kafela. When don't we rely on a kafela? To be mekel. Here, I want to be machmir. You understand the question? When do we rely on kafela? We want to be mekel. We want to be lenient. I don't want 60. I don't think I have 60. So if there's a mixture here, and the goy tells me there's no flavor, I can have it according to some shittas, right? But Ramah says we don't use kafela for whatever reason. Here, Ramah, I don't want to be mekel, I want to be machmir. What if let's be machmir, right? Let's just give it to a kafela and be machmir. If he says there's a flavor, yes, then it's aser. Why can't you use it to be machmir? So, what do you say? According to the crazy flacy, Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz says yes. In this case, you have to be machmir. Give it to kafela if you find one. The Premier Godam says no. Once you do not use a kafela, we don't use them for anything. It's one of those situations that you cannot figure out. There's no kafela, there's no recourse to kafela, therefore, you look at what you have. Either you have the shear, or you don't have the shear, and that's it. But that's an interesting point, because I would think I can't use a kafela to be lenient, but maybe to be machmir, like the crazy place, he says, maybe. He says, no. Once we don't use them, we don't use them. If it's a suffix derabbanan, it's lekula, and that's it. You don't have to be machmir. But we don't use him for kulas, we're not going to use him for chumas either. I found, however, a very interesting taz that I wasn't sure if to mention it, but I think it's an interesting taz because it will touch upon a very interesting topic later on in Hilchos Taaruvos. The taz says what we've just learned in this seif of min, beminoy, and she'ena minoy, when you have this chidush of salek, right? That's on condition they all fell at the same time. If you have min beminoy falling in, and then sometime later the other minoy fell in, no good. Why?
So who fell in last, sir?
The heter.
Oh, the heter fell.
Sure. Obviously, because what are we saying right now?
But if I had min b'mino first.
No, not min b'mino by themselves. Min b'she'eno minoy.
Min b'she'eno mino first.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly. So the Taz says it already became an isser. It's a form of chanan. You can say later on if something falls in, what is that going to do? It's not going to help the situation. It already has become usher. Does that make some sense?
Sure.
Yeah.
No, but
what do you say to what? Does everybody understand what the Taz is saying? If you have min b'she'eno mino first, one is mutter, one is usher, right? There's not enough in the eno mino to be mevatel the mino, or whichever is the one is usher.
Or there is a
No, there isn't. There isn't enough. There isn't enough. There will be enough.
So there's no question with spilling. We're not talking about
No spilling anymore.
Okay.
We're talking about right now before spilling. Before spilling. Okay. The spilling is an eventuality, but they happen at different times, different intervals. Min b'she'eno mino is not enough. Taz says it's usher. What good does it do that later on the other minoy falls in, and now I have this question on nishbach and salek, that you can't use that anymore. You've had enough time here to produce an isser, a chanan. Sure.
If I have a potato tray or chaylev,
right.
splashes on the potato. So now that's min. the potato doesn't have 60, it became usher.
Right.
Now, if that potato falls into a salad,
Okay.
where I have more potatoes, or let's say I have meat or I have fat,
Yes, that's correct.
then in that other pot, if I have 60 in that other pot against the chaylev,
Fine.
then the potato can be mitzaref to be mevatel the chaylev. And then we say still don't eat it, but the mechaber actually says not to.
Yeah, that's the issue of.
If it falls into
also,
the other pot.
right.
But here, if the
Yeah,
contents of that
shall
other
I
pot falls into the first pot, I'm not allowed to.
One more time.
If the contents of that, instead of this potato that absorbed the chaylev falling into the other pot with another 2 potatoes.
Right.
Those other 2 potatoes fall into the pot where the potato absorbed the chaylev. They fall here instead of it falling there. That would be the Taz saying that I can't. It doesn't help anymore.
It doesn't help anymore.
If they fall in here, but if the potato with the chaylev falls into their pot, it does help. That's what I don't understand.
It does not help for itself. It never will help for itself.
We
Right?
said it would.
Not everybody holds. I mean, right?
But the mechaber does.
Yeah. Well, eventually we'll get to that. What happens to that Isur Balua when it's can it ever be expelled? That's what you're talking about, right? It's not Basar B'chala. Right. Efshar or Efshar, right? So that will depend on that really. Only.
If you say Efshar, it's Hanan.
Yeah. Exactly.
So whoever holds no Hanan b'shar isurim.
Yeah. So that would be an eventual situation where this were to fall somewhere else.
So that's what I'm asking. So
Right.
what you're saying is that the ones that say that if a potato falls into a pot with 2 other potatoes becomes mutter, or even then you have 60 against the chaylev in that situation, they would say if the 2 potatoes fall into the pot with the first potato that absorbed, it could become mutter.
Yes, it could make
they would
it.
disagree
Of
with
course,
the
yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, not only that, I have something else to add. But the reason why I'm introducing is there are various ways to look at it. That's another circumstance, another situation, which Bezat Hashem will cover at another time. But here, for what we need to know, the Taz is saying that this chidush would not apply, and we understand why it would not apply. Because you already have the enomino becoming usher before the minoi ever gets a chance to come in. Had it happened at the same time, I have this chidush, I understand it more or less. It does not happen at the same time, we can't apply it. So I saw over here in the Chidusha Gershuni, Chidusha Gershuni on the side brings down a very famous Isur V'Heter in Hilchos Taaruvot. It's a famous Isur V'Heter that Bezat Hashem will learn that says that there is a big difference, according to him, when things do not happen at the same time, however, you were not aware of the whole thing until later after the fact. Isur V'Heter came in, there's not enough. Later on, more Heter came in, and you were not aware of the 2 situations. Imagine a cook, boom, right? It's all usher. Whatever he did is usher. Later on, some more spices, Heter. Half an hour later, he's tasting, it's more of this. And later on, you come by and you find out what happened. Only after the fact. The Isur V'Heter says that we don't say Hanan. You don't consider the fact that at the very beginning or at the first stage where there was not enough Heter versus the Isur, we don't count it. We don't regard it as a problem if at the very, very end there is enough Heter to be mevatel the Isur. Because the not knowing, not having known, not having been aware of the first incident allows me to consider the whole thing as one after the fact. It's a big chiddush, right? The hayediah, the not having the knowledge of the first time around, this poses a little bit of a problem for those of you who learned Basar B'Chalav. You may recall sticking a spoon in twice.
Right. That's what I'm thinking
Okay,
about.
so Bezat Hashem we'll talk about
exact
it.
opposite.
Yeah, exact opposite. Right? But that's the Isur V'Heter. Over there it's different for some reason. But we don't want to mix too many concepts into at this point. But that's a very important Isur V'Heter later on in Hilchos Taaruvos that says that therefore, according to the Chidusha Gershuni, according to that, it would not be a problem here too. So what are we going to say? The Taz either must be talking about that he obviously does know that it happened, or what I think it could be is also another possibility is the Taz goes along with the Shach. The Shach does not like the concept, not knowing, making a difference of whether something becomes Hanan or not. Because basically what that is saying is that if I don't know, that Isur that could have become Hanan will not become Hanan, because in the very end there's enough to be mevatel the Isur. Okay, fine. But it poses a problem later on. Later on it poses a problem because If something is Hanan, it's very simply, do I need 60 against just the original Isser? Or do I now need 60 against the entire piece that has the Isser Balua in it? That's basically, it's going to make a big difference.
Right, well, how do you get that from what I...
According to the Ramah, it's not so easy.
Right.
But only the Ramah says that. Mechaber doesn't hold by it. Right. But others do. There are other poskim that do hold. Hanan b'shar Yisurim, yeah. Yes, exactly. Yes. Yes, sure. Yeah, especially when we talk about the issue of Ef Shelesochtoi. So at least that piece will remain Asr. That's what we're going to see. We're going to see a situation where everything else may be saved, right? But at least that piece remains Asr. However, if I use the Isser Veheter, then not even that piece becomes Asr. Because in the end, that piece is also mutter. You see, so let's forget it. Like you said, let's forget about Hanan and let's forget about everything else not being a problem here. What about this piece? According to, right? Will this piece at least be Asr, for other reasons, or not? Well, if it happened at the very end, maybe there's enough against that whole Isser, so that piece is mutter for me to eat too. That's where it will make a difference. So this is a very interesting scenario that comes about later on with this Isser Veheter. Okay, let's go on to, I think I mentioned last week that Halacha, Lemaise, as far as this Seif is concerned, the Shach, the Marshal, the Prach, are Matir, the Minoi, and the Asr, the Eno Minoi. The Taz says everything is mutter. Same thing with the Bach, the Kreis you place in the Chabas Das. They say everything here is mutter in this scenario of Min, the Minoi, B'She'eno Minoi.
So they hold by this halakha like the Mechaber.
Yeah, like the Mechaber, yeah.
But nevertheless...
Yeah, the Ramah seems not to disagree either.
Yeah.
So that's why I was always curious as to why, if the Mechaber and the Ramah are in agreement, why do they make a big fuss of it?
Yeah, I asked Rabbi Elyahu Kin, he
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
we have such...
But you have somebody like the Marshal, exactly. You have somebody like the Marshal, the Prach. But what's interesting is that they compromise here. In other words, they're saying that only the She'eno Minoi would be Asr, not the Minoi. All right, the next point. No, some are treating this as a compromise. They're saying, okay, it's an interesting scenario based on the Gemara, even though they're very different, the Gemara. But we can handle the Mino being batal, but the She'eno Minoi will have to remain Asr. It's too much for them. It's too much of a chiddush to say that the Eno Minoi will also be mutter. So it appears like it's a sort of compromise that this at least remains Asr. But I think it's more of a chumrah. That's the way to look at it, because there are poskim that say it would be okay. So it's at least a chumrah. In Hefta Meruba, you can rely on those that say that's just okay. Sure. The next seif, which we'll cover briefly, which is very interesting.
It's all a little strange. How is it they were both in one pot? This is a valuable pot.
Right.
Everything was in one pot. They're going to tell me I can eat certain things in the pot and others I can't eat, even though it might make sense
right.
if you study it.
Right.
It doesn't look right.
It's
Either
you
can eat it or you can't.
It's a very unique situation. Yeah. It's a very unique situation of salik. But we learn enough, even though we don't really learn enough from the Gemara because they're very two different cases, nevertheless, it appears to be that it's based on that concept, even though they're different. I agree that it's obvious that they're different, but the concept is still a viable concept to say salik and let them handle each other, let them cancel each other out. I mean, on our own we would not be able to say something like that, for sure not. All right, the next seif, which is a short seif, I think we can get to it very quickly. When did we say Shenishbach? When did we say the halacha? When something spilled and we have a doubt as a result of the spilling, it's a suffix. We don't know how much there was. Maybe there was enough. Maybe there was not enough. Aval isur shenis arav beheter. You have isur which is mixed with heter. Hu lefanenu. It's before us. Ve'ef shalamod al shiora. And you cannot really figure out. You just don't know how to. It's difficult for you to figure it out. Afal pishu misurim shel divreihem. Even though it's a rabbinic decree, even though it's something with the rabbanan, it's still asur. Why is it asur? Just because you can't figure out, but others can, it doesn't mean you can be lenient because of that. It's not a suffix as a result of something beyond your control. Nishbach. Nishbach is something that you have no control over. The Chachamim gave you reason to be lenient here. You have reason to be lenient, or whatever. But it's your fault. That's not a real suffix. A suffix in chisoron yediah, as they call it, ignorance, is not a real suffix. Now this is the reason why I want to just spend just a couple minutes on this, even though it seems to be like a simple halacha, is because it's not so crystal clear if we look at other halachas where there is sfeikas, whether it's in Taaruvot, whether it's in Hilchas Niddah. You sometimes find that there is leniency, and sometimes you find that there is strict, and sometimes you find there's a machlokes. It all depends what kind of a suffix it is. Does anyone here know what a kachal is? The udder. The udder of the cow. Yeah, for those who learn Basar b'chala, yeah. Kachal. Unless you lived in Iran or in Iraq or in certain countries, they actually ate those things. Did you ever have one?
No.
Sure. In some places it was not a delicacy, it was very cheap. And in some places it was expensive. You only have one per cow. Right? But what's interesting about the kachal is that it actually has milk. And you can, in a way, taste basar b'chalav in a sense. You're not really going to feel it, because if you prepare it properly, you really have to remove any vestige of the milk. There's a way to do it. There's a special way to cut it up, and a special way to squeeze it and bang it out before you decide how to prepare it, whether to cook it or to roast it. You still have to be careful not to cook it with other meat, regular meat. Yeah. Now how can you? Oh, yes? That's what I'm talking about. The udder of the cow. That's what I'm talking about. The kahal.
Okay,
Yeah.
Another part, milk.
Yeah. That's the general area of the cow that we're talking about. Yes. So anyway, over there, that milk is not asur midaraisa. Why? Because it says, the Chazal learned that the only chalab, the only milk that is asur, is of a live animal. Lo tevashel gdi b'chalev imo, of the mother while she's alive. If it's a shchuta, chalav shchuta, the milk of a slaughtered animal, is asur only midrabanan. The Chazal learned that. It's asur, but it's not asur midaraisa. So over there, the question is, there's a question by kahal. If you don't know, it got mixed up, it got cooked together with other meat, you don't know how much milk there was, how much came out of it, you have to calculate against the whole kachal. 60 against the whole thing. Why don't we say Safek Rabbanan Lakula? You don't know how much it was, You don't know. Now, here we say, apparently we are being told that such a suffix is not a real suffix. Okay? Here, okay?
Yeah.
Here we're being told that such a suffix is not a real suffix. So that's why, as a result of this, the Beis Yosef has a whole question, okay, on this, on the tour. He's the one that mentions this. Because of this, therefore, by kahal, it's also asur. Because a suffix in chisoron yediah, that you have no knowledge, is not a suffix. That's not a real suffix. Go ask somebody else to figure it out. You don't know how to do? Ask somebody that knows. Just because you don't know, that does not make it into a suffix. Nishbach is a real suffix. It happens once in a while. Ba'akrai. It happened by chance. Chachamim were lenient. You don't know? Have somebody else figure it out.
But by nishbach,
Right.
the mitzvah. It's not that you don't know.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist anymore that you know about.
Right.
Because that issue no longer exists in
Yeah.
one pot.
The Ran explains that if we were to be lenient in any suffix like that, or people do not know, then
Nobody would know.
nobody would. Everybody would be lenient all over the place. So therefore, the Chachamim had to be very strict with the midah, with the measurements of how much is required, and not just leave it up to the individual. And that explains why a regular suffix machal chisoron yediah is not a good suffix. But what's going on in Chal? What's going on in Chal? The Taz does a beautiful job. If you ever have a chance to learn the Taz, on this Sif, this Taz is a very interesting Taz, because this Taz actually does a beautiful job in explaining all the different kinds of sveikas, explaining the Mechaber, the Beis Yosef. It's a Taz v'i efshar lamod al shiura. I highly recommend it. It's not a difficult one. Yeah, not a difficult one. He actually goes through the various shitas. It's an easy one, not too long, and he really goes through it very, very nicely, succinctly. Yeah, systematically. And he says Chal is really different. They're both asur, but for different reasons. So the Tur really didn't mean to say that because of this, that one is asur. It just means that for similar reasons, that one is asur too. Why is Kachal? Why do I need 60 times over there? Very simple. Because even though it's a suffix derabanan, right? I still have to have the required amount, and if I don't have the required amount, if I don't know what the required amount is, I have to use the maximum. When you don't know, but you can release yourself or solve the problem by using the maximum, just use the maximum. In other words, what the Taz explains, by kahal, I have a way out to eat this mixture. You know what my way out is? Use the maximum shear. By the way, with kahal, there's a very interesting chiddush there. If you learn Siman Tzadik, you will see that kahal is the only one where you can actually use the kahal itself in the 60s. So you really need 59. You can use the kahal itself in the mixture to figure it out, because it's really mutter. Right.
Even though it has certainly absorbed the milk.
Yeah, of course. Exactly. It's not chanan. It can never be. So the Taz beautifully explains that over there, it's also asur, but for a different reason, because over there, I have a way out of the problem. What's my solution? Use the maximum. There are, however, situations where I don't have a way out. It's either asur or mutter. It's either going to make the whole thing asur or mutter. By kahal, it's not either asur or mutter. It can for sure become mutter if I use the maximum shear. I'll give you an example. By certain sfeikas, certain doubts, if somebody can figure it out for me, he will determine whether it's asur or mutter. By for example, by stains by a niddah. There's a whole question over there about certain stains, whether they are after the beged of the woman, after the garment went through laundry. And there's still a stain. We want to know when it's from, whether it's from before, recently, never went away. It all depends if you can see it on the surface or if it has been absorbed into the beged. Whether it will be tameh or tahor, clean. You need an expert sometimes to be able to figure out the type of stain. And the one who has this question may not know on his own. So we're machmir there, even though the whole idea of ksomim, stains is midrabanan. It's only when a woman actually feels the blood coming out, right? This is a stain. The whole thing is that still we're machmir there. Because just because you don't know how to figure it out, if you show it to someone else, he may be able to figure it out. Okay? So still, we're machmir. Why are we machmir? Because it's chisaron yediyah. Even though the whole thing is a derabanan, that's not a real suffix. You want to solve it's resolvable. Same thing with the kahal for a different reason. Right? It's not mutter, even though it's a derabanan, because it's resolvable. How? In a different way. Use the maximum shear, you get out of the problem. If you have 65, it's not like a situation where it's a real suffix, as the Taz calls it, that the whole world does not know. We don't have experts today in trying to figure out certain sirchas in the animal. In Hilchos Tarfos, in Treifas, there's certain questions, and some people, we don't know how to figure it out. So according to the Taz, not everybody agrees with him on this. If a suffix is a suffix for everyone, nobody can figure it out, it's a real suffix. Then that's considered a real suffix, because either it's asur or it's mutter, right? Either it's asur or mutter. There's no way for me to get out of it by using a maximum shear like by kahal. There's no other way for me to figure it out by asking somebody else. So this is either asur or mutter. So I say, well, it's a derabanan. So suffix derabanan lekula, right? Because it's either going to be asur or mutter. It's not like I can get out of it. If it's going to be either this or that, and it's a derabanan, I can be lenient if it's a real suffix. So suffix for an individual is not a suffix. I can show it to others. A suffix of the entire world is a machlokes. And machlokes, let me see what the shittas are. We have Rashba says it's not a suffix. I think there's others too, but at least I know the Rashba doesn't hold that it's a suffix. Even if the whole world is not an expert, because we're not knowledgeable, does not render it a real suffix. Now, what's interesting is that there is a situation, however, that you can sometimes use a suffix to be mitzaref to another suffix. One of the areas of Hilchos Taaruvos deals with sfeikas, and one of the most fascinating areas that really comes in handy in Hilchos Taaruvos is when you have something called, in English, a double whammy. A sfeika. Two sfeikas, two doubts. Is it asur or is it mutter? If you say it's asur, right, but maybe there's this kind of a situation that would render it mutter according to this. You follow me? So when you have a double situation, a double doubt, it really, really makes it a lot easier. So that's a big question that remains, a machlokes between the Pri Megadim.
Would it make a difference if the first speaker was the Raisa and you did Lochama?
Right. No, there are certain rules that we have to follow when it comes to. So you're right. There are certain rules that we have to follow in the sveka that they have to be certain kinds of svekas that are allowable. So
Is it only a possibility by the Rabban, by the Raisa?
No. But there are situations. It's a sefer deraisa lechumra. But right. But there are situations. Yeah.
Not all Rabbanans lend us face.
Yes.
But the only times you can say such a thing, Bechlal, it's if it's Rabban.
Yeah. In certain situations, we'll see. There's quite a few rules, and I don't have them all listed here. But Zat Hashem will cover it when we get to it. What's interesting, however, is here in this situation is that if it's a suffix that we are not a baki in, we're not an expert in, it's even though we're being machmir, we're being strict and we're not allowing it, we may be able to use it in conjunction with a svek sveka. We may be able to be mitzvah of it. And that's, I think the Darkei Moshe brings down that you would be able to. The Nekudas HaKesef, which is, by the way, a commentary of the Shach himself on the side, on the Taz. He notices it's something the Taz wrote, so he basically commented on that. Nekudas HaKesef here is Machmir, that we're not Basar. And the Pri Megadim says you would be able to rely on it in a Hefset Meruba situation. So that's the various examples that are, for the most part, mentioned in the Taz, that I highly recommend going through, to get an idea of what does the Mechaber mean, that if it's a suffix that we don't know, it's not acceptable. And the answer is that if it's simple lack of knowledge does not render a suffix for us to be lenient. Give it to somebody else. That is not enough for you to be able to determine that this is therefore, I can go by the lenient opinion. It's not a real suffix. It would have to be either a situation that does not come about very often, like nishpach, or something, as others would say, that is not known to anyone. Nobody knows the halacha, and this we don't have the experts to figure this out, and because of that, it's a suffix that can never be resolved. So if it's at the Rabbanon, then I go lekula. And this is the area of sveikas that B'ezrat Hashem will be talking about later. But it's interesting, the Mechaber points this out over here already now here, only because nishpach is a form of suffix. It is. It's a form of suffix, that's why he mentions it over here. Nishpach is a form of suffix, and there are all kinds of sveikas. And we will see later on that there's a suffix in the blias, or the pots. How much did it absorb? If you learned Basar b'chalav, you may have remembered, and we'll be talking about here too, about Noisen Tamlif Gam. Did you cover that a little bit?
Of course.
Yeah. And let's say, give you an example. Let's say a goy cooked for you something kosher in his pots. Can you have it or not? So you have the famous rule of it's a suffix. It's a suffix, right? It's a suffix. Whether you have blias that are also here, but we rely there on stam kelim are not bnei yomam. They were most likely not used on that day. So that idea, that concept, that rule helps me resolve that situation in that kind of a suffix. All kinds of sfeikas that can come about in all kinds of situations.
But the answer is regard to
Well, there's always a lechatchila, right? There's always a lechatchila, and there's always a b'di'evet in certain situations, and there's even a hefsem meruba situation. Yeah, obviously you don't want to use something that is a eino ben yomo, is meat. It's a meat pot, but I haven't used it for 2 months. Can you cook dairy in it? No. But if your wife tells you, oh, by mistake, I used the crock pot for chocolate, I used it for something dairy, oh no, that's a problem. When was the last time you used it? That would make a difference. So it's a suffix, but because that suffix has a certain additional rules, that if you haven't used it for a while, it's not some time of gam, right? The food may be okay, but guess what? The pot is still going to be a problem.
You see? Says you can use it for
if it's Basar b'chalav situation. Yeah, it all depends, right? If it's really eno ben yom. So you see, there's different kinds of sveikas that will allow for different halachas depending on what the circumstances are. But Mr. Shem, that we still have quite a bit to go to eventually discuss this one as well. Yes.
Is that correct?
Right. So in this case, even though it's a suffix machmach chisaron yedi, which everybody's in agreement is no good, that's not a real suffix. Some would say that you could combine it in a sfeik sfeika situation. Whenever a sfeik sfeika would be permissible, which we haven't covered yet, this, according to some, would be eligible to be part of a sfeik sfeika. In other words, if you have an additional suffix on top of that, then maybe you would be able to be lenient. So this is a very interesting halacha that sometimes you may need to rely on that. In a hefse meruba situation, a caterer has tremendous amount of things that were cooked up, and he has this question that comes up. That's a hefse meruba. What are you going to do? You may be able. We can't figure it out. It's too difficult. Plus, you have another additional suffix. Then you may be able to rely on that. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Let's say you don't know whether you made a bracha before you eating.
Yeah. Right.
So my understanding well, it's a suffix is to Rabbanim, don't make that again, or whatever.
There's a special rule by bracha, suffix brachas lehakel. You don't want to make.
the bracha again,
Right.
But of course,
Sfeik sfeika, you want to say?
no, if they make a suffix based on lack of one's ability, a suffix based on
Lack of knowledge.
lack of knowledge, could you make the argument that it's not a real suffix? Really, I guess nobody else has access to it.
Right.
And tell you
It's
whether or not
spilled.
you forgot it or not.
And it's spilled.
Right.
It's spilled.
No, here
I'm
it's.
not about spill, I'm not about bracha.
No, he's talking about brachas right now. Yeah.
Bracha, you forgot you made another bracha or something like that. Is that a real suffix? Or is it a issue of a suffix based on lack of one's ability? You know what I mean? Am I making any sense?
In brachas, there's a whole different set of rules. Brachas, you have to be careful with Shem Shamayim, Levatola, not just to say a bracha in vain. And bracha is also not me'akev. If it's in mitzvahs, for example, a bracha is not me'akev. You can fulfill the mitzvah even without having said a bracha. You follow me?
Yeah.
So that because of that, there's the rule. The suffix brachas lehakel. In other words, we're not machmir. We don't require. Why do we say a bracha to begin with? Because depending, if it's what you're eating, it can be considered stealing. It appears that one explanation is that you're taking something from this world benefiting without making a blessing to Hashem.
Right.
So the Chachamim tell us that in certain circumstances, you better you're safer not making the bracha than making the bracha again. There's a bracha she'ena tzricha too. You've already said it once. Say it again. You've already said it once. So it's important to learn the halachas of brachas as to when to say and when not to say. Did I have in mind? They just brought me some more food from the same type of bracha. Do I have to say it again?
That's right. If you're unsure, that's a great
Right.
example of what.
Yeah. So this is not a suffix. Not
That's
exactly.
the question.
Yeah, this is not a suffix of an isser right over here. This is more of a suffix of a requirement. Do I need to make it? Because after all, I possibly already did or did have in mind, and it's not a requirement. I shouldn't have to say it. So that's a little bit different. Here we're talking about isser and heter. And isser and heter, I have to be able to figure out. I have to be able to resolve the situation. Either it's mutter or it's aser. And the halacha is that if I don't know but somebody else can, then it's not a real suffix.